Hey everyone, Christine here, and today we are going to be making some no knead bread. And I like to make no knead bread. It's pretty easy, it can be quick, and it's fun. And then it's nice to have some fresh bread at home. So what you'll need is obviously some flour. Today I'm going to be using all-purpose flour, but bread flour is just as good. One could argue even better. I would say as far as baking goes, if you are going to use all-purpose flour for your breads, especially like a kneading bread, you're going to want to knead it a little bit longer just to release more gluten. Then the other ingredients you'll need is yeast. These are two different kinds of yeast. This is the quick rising one, and this is just the normal one. So if you use this one, I would let your dough sit overnight. But if you're going to use this one, you can let it sit for like hour and a half, 2 hours. Keep kind of an eye on it. But yeah, so we'll be using this one today, a full packet. Other thing you'll need is a little bit of salt, water, about 1.5 cups or so. I'm also going to add a little bit of honey, some local honey, into mine, just because I think it makes it a little sweeter. I like how it tastes a little bit better. You're welcome to do that, but you don't have to. You could also use like maple syrup or something. If you do add a little bit of honey or something like that, I would just use a little bit less water. Important thing to note on the water, while you want it to be warm, you want to be careful that it doesn't get over 130 or 120 degrees. The yeast can actually get killed if the water is too warm. So you'll need about 3 cups of the flour, about 1.5 cups of water, packet of yeast, and about maybe a little bit more than a teaspoon of the salt. I kind of eyeball it. It also kind of depends on how salty you like your bread. I don't like ours particularly salty, so I don't put too much in it. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to start with, I always start with putting the liquid in first and then adding the yeast to let it kind of sit and do its thing. So I've got a little bit less than 1.5 cups of water here. So I'll add that into my bowl. Okay. I'll put a little dollop of honey. I'll let it mix around a little bit. You could also add the honey like into the water beforehand, kind of just depends on what you like to do. Then we'll get our yeast open. Got my kitchen scissors here. They always seem to disappear somehow. So yeah, I don't know if anybody else has that problem, but I do. They seem to end up in all sorts of different places. Get this open. I'm just going to swirl that around a little bit. Perfect. You probably, I don't know if you can, well, to show you guys, but you can kind of see how that's looking. Super. So now I'm going to add the flour. You're going to need about 3 cups. Depending on how much water you have, will obviously dictate. I usually do 3 cups to about 1.5 cups of water. I will say I find that if your dough is a little bit wetter, that you get it rises a little bit more and it's less dense, which is always good, I think. So 1 cup, 2 cups, and 3 cups. Perfect. Flour back in a moment, and then I just kind of eyeball the salt, like a palm full a little bit. Get that in there, and then we're going to start mixing it around. Now you don't have to like knead it proper, but you want to mix it around. And again, if the dough's a little bit wetter, you're going to get a couple more bubbles in your bread. Start mixing. I like to use a metal bowl because I find it easier to kind of scrape everything off the sides. get it mixing together. You can always add a little bit more liquid, like I'm gonna need a little bit more liquid, I think. But you wanna make sure that you add it early on, because otherwise, I think it makes the dough consistency a little bit weird. There we go, that's looking better. Again, you kind of want it a little bit on the wetter side. I find that is gonna result in a bread that rises a little bit higher and is less dense, which is always nice, especially if you're making like sandwiches or something. The nice thing too about making your own bread is if it gets old or stale or something, it's super easy. You can make your own croutons, some breadcrumbs. So it's just kind of fun to use what you've got at home. All right, so that is what my dough looks like. It's a little bit wet. And now I'm gonna put it in. Now, if you don't have one of these, this is called a proofing basket. And I lined it with some rice flour. Sometimes the dough does stick to it, like if it rises higher than the rice flour. But you don't need to use a proofing basket. You can always use just another bowl, like a clean one. And you don't really, again, if you use a metal bowl, that's what I used before I got this proofing basket. And so then you can just cover it, and you want to leave it in kind of a warmish, room temperature warmish spot. You know, I always kind of like to put it near the oven or something like that, especially if I'm cooking something else, because that lets it rise. All right. So because it's pretty wet, I really love how wet I have it today. That's awesome. Sometimes I don't get it wet enough. You know, I'll show you my little secret. So put this in here. Perfect. Now it looks kind of lumpy and awkward, but so I am going to get just like, I know I like to use a nice linen cloth to cover it, but any kind of kitchen rag works. I usually only use the like plastic wrap if I'm making pizza dough or if we are making bagels or something like that, and then I would oil it. But for this, for the no knead bread, you know, something as simple as that. And then we'll get a nice linen cloth, my chicken one, because who doesn't love chickens, right? Matches my headband. Cover that. And then we're gonna wait probably, I'm gonna give it an hour and a half, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to bake it. Okay, so it's been about 2 hours or so. So our dough has risen. I'm gonna show you guys. Take a look-see at that. So it's still pretty fluffy. It's still a little bit wet, which is great. It's risen quite a bit. I'm pretty pumped about it. So to bake it, you are going to need a Dutch oven or something like that. You can use like a loaf pan too if you prefer. I love using my Dutch oven, so that's what I usually use. And you want to preheat your oven to 450 degrees. And the other thing that you're going to want to do, the other thing that you should do is also preheat your loaf pan or your Dutch oven. So what I usually do is just leave my Dutch oven in the oven as it's preheating. Obviously be really careful when you pull it out because it'll be super hot. So next step is simple. You need some parchment paper, and you'll put your dough on the parchment paper and then just put it either into your Dutch oven or your loaf pan, and then you will bake the bread for about a half hour. I usually do more like 35 minutes. And if you like to have your crust a little bit crispy and a little bit golden, if you're using a Dutch oven at about probably minute 25, I would pull off the lid of the Dutch oven. So that way it can get golden and crispy. So here we go. I'm gonna just flip this over. It's got kind of a pretty little pattern on it. I don't know if you guys can pick it up a little bit. There we go. But there we go. And then I'll grab my Dutch oven real quick. Hold on. Got this. We're just gonna drop our bread right in there. And then get your lid, put it on, and you're ready to slide that right into the oven and bake it for 30 to 35 minutes. Okay, so I'm about to pull the bread out of the oven, and there it goes. Okay, so take a look at that bad boy. I'm gonna pull it out. Whoops. That's the nice thing about the parchment paper, but do be careful because once it gets baked a little bit, clearly the parchment paper falls apart. But it's a little bit hot, but here is our beautiful loaf of bread. I usually let it sit for a little bit and cool down. I mean, if you want warm bread, obviously with your dinner, you don't need to let it cool completely. But just give it a couple of minutes so it's not too hot, and enjoy. Thanks for joining me today as we made some no knead bread. Definitely stick around for some other videos, as well as if you have any comments or questions, leave it in the comment section, and we'll see you next time.